a good idea to be the thing that's sitting between people and their food, but strap in because this is actually going to be a lot of fun. We are really lucky to have these panelists, especially two of them are in from London, so it makes us an international panel right off the bat. Right to my right is Tom Loosemore. Did I pronounce that right? Okay. There's probably a more appropriate British accent for that. Tom is in charge of, Tom's experience goes way back in terms of digital services and service design, and he basically founded and set up the UK government's digital services department. Now he's in private practice with his own consultancy after running the digital co-op, and the company you're in charge of right now is, I can't read my notes. Public Digital. Okay, that's fairly obvious. That's perfect. And then sitting right to his right is Jeremy Goldberg, who's here in San Francisco, but also has a long history in digital services, starting with actually public affairs, but has worked for 3 different mayors, which in itself I think is an incredible accomplishment, both in San Jose and Nolens, and now back home in San Francisco. And he runs digital services here for San Francisco government. And the Department of Innovation here in our own city. And then to his right is Chris Averill, who is also in from London, works for Globant for digital government services, and has actually been started in industrial design, moved into interaction design and service design, and then moved into account management for before government. I believe there was. I can't read my notes at all, so you help me out here. Can we have the mics on?
Hello. A bit of interactive TV.
There you go, ITV, that's right.
And my daughter goes to the same school as Tim Bernard-Lee, so I feel like I'm the godson of the internet.
Well, and this is great to have 2 folks from London here because, of course, Britain is probably far in advance of the United States in 2 areas, and one being digital government services, and the other being cricket. So we have experts here at one of the few things that we're not very good at. Okay, so the first question I have for you is why now? I mean, government's always been a service, right? So, and digital services have been around for quite a long time, at least since the mid-90s, certainly by 2000. But we have seen an incredible upswing in cities across the world, especially in the United States, and UK has been doing this for even a little bit longer. Huge interest and huge activity, a lot of investment here. Why right now? Go.
I think there's a combination of some very powerful forces coalescing. One is that there are very few things you can do as a politician that will both save money and improve the quality of services. And transforming your services to make them digital is one of them. Secondly, the expectation of the public that services are ever simpler, more convenient, 24/7, real time, cannot any longer be ignored. I would argue ignored for far too long by governments, but it simply can't be denied or ignored. Internet has become mainstream. And I think thirdly, and actually this is, if I'm honest, possibly wrongly the most powerful force, as too many people inside government had enough, just had enough of the way things had worked with anything to do with technology over the last 20 years in most governments around the world, which was a wholesale outsourcing of any technical delivery to, frankly, a handful of very large vendors who got very, very good at milking a system. And to be honest, the hollowing out of technology capability within governments, such that most people with IT in their name were actually contract managers, procurement people, not actual technologists, meant that went on for far too long, until relatively recently when we were able to bring some technologists back into government.
Nice.
Yeah, I would add to that, the gentleman was walking around here with a shirt that said show versus tell. And I think that expectations may have changed, right, in terms of we want things to happen more quickly, we want things to be more available, but I really believe that expectations have always been there that you can do better than this, right? There's just now a bigger, broader platform to communicate and engage. And from our perspective in the Mayor's Office of Civic Innovation here in San Francisco, we're surrounded by just an incredible amount of talent and skills and people that want to give back in terms of making their city a better place to live. And when you work in local government, if anyone has before, you can see it. When you're not getting things done, you walk out your door, you walk up to pick up the transit, take it to work. You know when something's not working, when it's not on time. When something on the street hasn't been picked up. The other day, there was a washing machine on the sidewalk at the corner of our street. You know, that's not exactly the best place to leave your appliances. We can agree on that. And so let's make it easier for people to send in a request, and when you do, for this to be picked up, let's respond and let's get it done quickly. I'm proud to say that it took 5 hours, just 5 hours for that to be done, to be picked up by Public Works. But it's really that type of responsive, more efficient, more effective government. And I think let's show the results and let's make sure that we get it done for people more quickly.
Chris, you're on the other side of this. You're consulting to government. You're not within government. So what do you see as the opportunities here and what's happening now?
I think what's come around to make government as a service and the changes we're seeing so important is everyone's trying to save money, and technology is potentially a good way of saving money. But if it's not done right, it becomes a massive inhibitor to us citizens, us public, us individuals living a quality of life, from terrible services around our areas we live to housing, benefits and healthcare. So what's been amazing for me working with government over the years is to see new people coming into government to shake it up. So my clients at the Metropolitan Police in London, arguably the world's best police force outside of San Francisco, PD, he comes from a communications background. He's ex-broadcast, so he's nothing to do with the police. But because he understands that effective policing is all around giving citizens what they want, communicating, and digital is the best way to do that, he's totally changing the way that the police police. So it does come down to inspirational people who are willing to, I won't nick Tom's line, but willing to put their jobs on the line to make things change.
Where's the low-hanging fruit for government? Like, what's the easiest stuff to pick off and have early wins?
Easy. I mean, the amount of waste in existing IT procurement is simply mind-boggling. And so the very first thing to do is stop the self-harm. So in the UK, we instituted in 2010 a centralized spend control process on all technology spend for central government. Just by stopping stupidity, we saved £4 billion over the course of the Parliament.
How do you identify the stupidity,
It's
though?
not difficult.
Okay.
When you actually have people who understand technology saying, why is that hosting contract costing £40 million? Have you seen how much Amazon AWS costs or Azure costs? Go and take a hike. It's that simple. It really is like shooting fish in a barrel for most governments. And that is a consequence of outsourcing the knowledge as a client about, things get cheaper in the world of technology. I think that in the UK, in terms of show not tell, which I totally support, we actually started on the services side with publishing. And we said government shouldn't have 2,500 websites, such that as a citizen, you need to understand the structure of government before you can have your needs met. Government should have one website that's really clear, really simple, and is oriented around your needs. So we did that first in the UK with gov.uk, clean English, clean designs, plain English, really challenging to the structural alignment internally within government to say we need to align around the needs of our citizens. I think that's common for many large organizations. But that won us. We won Design of the Year, we beat the Olympics. That won us a lot of momentum, which we then doubled down to actually getting to the transactional and relational services, which is at the heart of...
Did it help coming from a place like the BBC for so many years, where here's an organization that has so much content, so much reach, and yet, had one front door to serve everyone? Yeah,
I mean, we had fought for many years in the BBC to make sure there was only one bbc.co.uk or bbc.com over here. But I think what my colleague friend and Mike Bracken, who came on the journey with me, he'd come from the Guardian newspaper. But I think, if I'm really honest, what those organisations taught us was how to create space to get stuff done the right way in a large bureaucracy. It wasn't so much the proposition as the culture of the organisation that you're in and what you need to do to change them, which is pretty bloody.
Yeah,
be told.
I'm sure Jeremy, Chris?
The creating the space piece of this, I think, is low-hanging fruit. There are organizations, there are cities that are open and willing to meet with startups and meet with entrepreneurs and learn about the work that you're doing, you know, with an eye on impact, right? It's not something, at least from our standpoint, it's a nice to have. It's actually something that fits within our priorities, mayoral priorities, city priorities, quality of life, being the umbrella for all this work. What we did in San Francisco is we monthly have open office hours. So if you're a startup or an entrepreneur, you want to come in, share what you do, tell us about your work, demo your product. We want to learn. And we want to figure out, like, have you done your research before you even come in to understand what you believe our needs to be? And are you willing, more importantly, if we're going to work with you, are you willing to be a partner and co-develop this with us? And I think that's what we've offered is the space, the opportunity to get our insights, understand the challenges that we face, and then be a partner, because we're taking the long view here. Like, these are, when we're talking about social change and impact in these cities and improvements, there are low-hanging fruit that we can pursue together, but we want people that we can work with over years to really figure out a better way to make this last.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because San Francisco City has a startup in residence program, and it's growing. Can you talk a little bit briefly about that?
Briefly, so we've had run 2 rounds of startup in residence, which is an accelerator program model. We just wrapped up our 2nd round. It's a 16-week program. Startups from around the world, over 300 have applied in the past 2 cohorts. Startups will work on a specified challenge that a department issues. And when it's issued and startups apply, they're immediately entered into a competitive request for proposals. So you co-develop a solution with a department over 16 weeks, getting insights, experience, mentoring, support, network here in San Francisco. And at the end of the 16 weeks, there's an option to begin to negotiate price and contract. So you actually can build with the potential to get a contract with government. This program started with one city, started with San Francisco in 2014. We're in 4 cities now. We have partners in The Hague and in Amsterdam that have also developed the Startup in Residence program, and we'll add several more over the coming year. So this is something really I would encourage you to take a look at. Even if you're not working in the gov tech or civic tech space, if you're working on the enterprise side of your company, like, that is something that we're interested in. Is some of those solutions may be a fit for the work that we do and the needs that we have.
Chris, low-hanging fruit?
Oh, gosh. There's so many obvious things that have little impact. I think from a public perspective, the things that really irk you, that seem obvious to change, actually don't really change an organization. And the organizational change, the behavioral change within government is very similar to the same in any large organization, an airline or a bank or a travel company. So what we've found to be the most effective way of changing is to talk about the language that the central government understand. So how is this going to save us money, and how is it going to improve people's lives? And those things are sadly you can't separate. In the old days, it's how can we spend money to improve people's lives. Now it's how can we save. So for what we go after is how can we spend the least in the quickest amount of time to prove the value of transformation through digital within the organization. What's going to resonate the most? What's going to tell the best story? What's the thing that's going to let our client talk about this in a way that everyone goes, oh my God, that's amazing. And that's, for me, the lowest hanging fruit.
I think that's a really interesting narrative, that if you really want to change your organization deeply, you need to pick quite carefully what projects you choose to introduce what is often has to be a very radically different way of thinking and working, to be genuinely user-centric, to be genuinely iterative, to be genuinely humble to the feedback you need to be receiving all the way along. And so what we did in government reasonably successfully, and what I've definitely been advising clients now quite carefully on, is pick the right projects where there's going to be a great story to tell at the end of it. Not just that it's likely to succeed, but actually that's going to have an impact that people and the rest of the organisation are going to care about. In the UK government, we call them exemplars. We did 25 of them, from tax to welfare to motoring to prison visits. And I wish at the start that we thought a bit more strategically about maybe which of the 25 is too many, it almost killed us. Which of the 10 of these are going to tell the best stories?
Right.
And I think it's probably obvious from that, which I completely agree with, is when that happens and people care about what's happening and the stories being told, it makes it easier for us on the government side to socialize and share those stories amongst our colleagues and our department partners. And when other cities call us asking about the work that was done by a startup or an entrepreneur, we can say, yes, this is great, and here's what we delivered. And there's more interest and enthusiasm to really establish entrepreneurship internally for the long term.
I think it's important to talk just briefly about procurement. Really unsexy, absolutely critical in every large organization I've ever seen to fundamentally transform procurement, to allow a wider range of suppliers in much more dynamic procurement. That was absolutely essential in the UK. And pretty much every organization, people get comfortable with a small number of quite large suppliers. You have to disrupt that to allow new space to come in.
Well, that's perfect, because that was going to be my next question. What are the impediments here to both working with government agencies or working within government? And then how do people get past them, either as a citizen or as a company that wants to service government?
Well, to some degree, if you're in government, it is incumbent upon you want the widest range of suppliers for the best fit for the job. You want to be able to keep that list up to date. You want to allow any bit of government to be able to buy on demand, be that cloud or be that services, be that whatever. So it's incumbent on government to a degree. If you're outside government, and this was definitely true in the UK, there was a community of small and medium-sized businesses, digital businesses in the UK, who were coherently and collectively making a very loud noise about the fact that they were excluded from government and they were good.
Good.
That was important. I mean, there were three other impediments that I think are important. We call them the square of despair. One of them is recruitment within government, hiring the right people. The second one is myths around security. So lots of myths around making things secure in government, not much basis in fact in many cases. And the fourth one is the business case process, which again I've seen is common with quite a few clients, is your business case process forces you to pretend you know all the answers up front. And you know how much value you're going to get, how much it's going to cost. And frankly, if you do things the right way in this digital world, you have to be honest and say, we don't know, and allow a more iterative business case process, which after 3 or 4 years in the UK we got to. But that's often quite challenging for large organizations to accept.
Tenacity. You've got to be tenacious. I mean, you've got to care. You've got to give a shit, you know? Because if you don't, you're just going to be another one of those people moaning and not changing. And it's actually the same. We take a lot of lessons from our government clients and apply them to our private sector clients, because government, ironically, are terrible at digital so often, yet when they do it brilliantly. And when they go for it, because there's a different set of reasons. It's not a commercial proposition generally I'm chasing. Right. It's it's delivering against my commitment, why I was voted in to do things. So if you're tenacious with government, you can make it work with government, you can make it work much better in the private sector. And so what I would love to see more collaboration at the top between the success, as you guys are here today, talking about how have you done it, and how can the private sector learn to do more, and how can the private sector then share what they've done back into government. Openness, open data, all those sorts of things that government are very good at, but private sector are often very scared of.
The only thing I'll add is it's leadership, right? I mean, it comes down to department heads, it comes down to its mayors, its governors, whatever you're thinking about in government, it's the leadership and the ability to stick your neck out there, right, and actually say, it's okay, we can do this. Because one of the first things that comes up when we talk about working in partnership or doing something creative, it's, you can't do that. And my question is, why? Yeah. And then to try to find out and really unpack the reason and say, well, let's point to a precedent. And we've looked to the UK on several occasions. It's been done this way before. And we can show a reason, we can show a good case, we can show a good example, and that why eventually comes around and be like, okay, I guess we can try to do this together. And that's part of what I think we can do to kind of overcome it, is just asking that follow-up as to why and going further. So
the last question, go ahead, Chris.
I want Tom to quote what you said earlier about, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing can happen is you get fired.
Yeah.
But no one ever gets fired from government, so you're not going to get fired. And even if you did, you probably didn't want to work there anyway. So, I mean, there's a sort of mindset you can get into in government, which is somewhat slightly seditious, but vital, which is it just doesn't really matter. do the right thing for the citizen, make sure what you make is brilliant, don't break the law, but pretty much every rule probably needs to change, so change them. Yeah. And there's a brilliant thing about government that took me a while to realise is civil servants love rules. They love rules. So just write some new ones and then just say, these are the new rules. And then they often become the new rules because you've got the confidence to say they're the new rules. I've seen that happen in large private sector organisations as well.
Well, this is, by the way, if you have questions, now's a good time to signal. We went up here, but before we go to that audience, I had a question about culture, because inside these teams, and this is true of large companies especially, just as much as it is of government, how you have to survive, how you need to, what you need to do to make innovation survive within large organizations is very different than if you're in a startup. And one of my favorite books is called The Catalyst. It's Jean Lidke and her co-authors doing a lot of research into identifying the sort of successful innovators within large Fortune 500 companies, enterprises, and trying to figure out what do they have in common. And as it turns out, the things they have in common are all fireable offenses, right? So they were hiding budget. They didn't stop working on a project when they were told to. Everything that they needed to do within an organizational culture, a large one, to make them successful and make these projects successful were exactly the things that the organizational culture was trying to get rid of. So is there an analog for this in government? What do you have to do to survive? What does the innovation process have to do to survive the culture of large institutions?
Well, I mean, firstly, never call it innovation.
Okay, there you go.
Well, no, seriously, it's a bit marginalized. It's much, much more important than that. It is about culture change to stay relevant. Firstly, you've got to get your right top-level sponsors, and we were very careful in the UK to make sure we had a minister backing us who knew the stakes, Francis Maud, who was in San Francisco yesterday, actually, who gave us the top cover we needed to create the space. But then it's a war of movement. It's basically, don't get into trench warfare with entrenched interests because you'll lose, because they're good at that. They're good at wars of attrition. So keep delivering, keep finding new ways to show value, build momentum, cash it in, target a different vector. It was literally a war of movement to create more space for then other people in the organization to work this new way in the space that you had created with your war of movement. It is, I'm afraid, military theory is how we applied it in the UK.
Great. Jeremy, Chris, something to add there?
I mean, it's about acknowledgement a lot of time, in the culture that work in the city. We have 80 public agencies. We have 30,000 employees. It's a big government for a city that's about 840,000 people, right? Running huge budget. These are really great times. What's the incentive, however, as a government employee in a department to perform differently, right? To be more efficient, more effective with the work. Naturally, there's an inclination to be a good steward of the public good and service and to give back, but it's not the financial incentive. Maybe there's an opportunity to get a raise at year's end. Maybe there's an opportunity to get a couple extra vacation days. But what we found is acknowledgement for the work that's being done through public events with the mayor, or events that we do, networking events and opportunities to present the great work and the collaborations that are taking place. That's the stuff that really we found helped to support folks that are taking some risks, and they're people that are being recognized by their department heads to do that good work. And then the other point would be the departments that we look to partner with from the Mayor's Office of Civic Innovation are those that are willing to say, we're going to dedicate at least a person to a person and a half's time on this project with your team. We'll have the capital and the resources and the budget to support them so that when this project wraps up, they actually can implement. And to the extent that we can continue to raise the profile and share with them new ways to learn, new techniques, new business practices, that's good for the department heads and that's good for us.
Okay. So the answer is very simple. And it applies to everybody in this room. It's not a technology problem, and technology is not the solution.
Yep.
Technology is an enabler to solve people problems. So that's number one. Stop diving in to the capability to deliver something that we don't truly understand. Number two, outcomes. Let's stop delivering products and projects, and you've got money to do a thing. And GDS have been brilliant at an ongoing improvement about creating a platform that enables outcomes. And outcomes are measurable, whereas deliverables aren't really measurable. It's sort of what we've agreed. We got out in the time as best as we could, and it's all, we're in it together. So for me, it's a process mindset. It's an end-to-end journey. It's an experience that is as big as the city or the transport network or the financial industry. And it's a service design approach to understanding a person throughout the whole of their life with that need, the tax, housing, benefit, transport, birth. It's the whole thing. Luckily, we've got a document called the GP Crisis, which you'll be seeing some copies around later. And you can see in a month what we're able to do to solve diabetes. It's like a £10 billion problem in the UK. And within 1 month, we solved it. Nearly.
Okay, you've been very patient, sir.
Yeah, so when you look at the comparison between government and the commercial world, in the commercial world you have competition, you want to use technology to grow your market share, to grow loyalty. When you look at government, most people see government as the eagle, and you don't have a competition. So how do you justify investing in technology to have a better journey for the public? And what would it take for you to use technology to improve the journey and look at the people as your customer?
I mean, there is a pressure on government, and it's a pressure around legitimacy with the people you are meant to serve. And so there is a pressure to improve, which is if the difference between what the public, the citizen, we all expect of our government and what government is able to deliver, bad things happen. And politicians understand that, and most civil servants understand that. That's what I meant earlier about the difference between what was expected and what was deliverable. It got so big, something had to change. But I think most of government is mostly service design most of the time. It's not actually technology. And there are now opportunities to offer much better services, much cheaper. And that twin possibility to be better and cheaper is very, very attractive given we're in an age of austerity and there isn't a lot of money around anymore. So money is often the way into the conversation. And if you can then say, by the way, thanks to internet ways of working, we can make the service even better, then it's a win-win. So, but you need to change the culture of the organization you're in, which is the hard bit.
And actually, Addy, I'll challenge you. Government has huge competition from the private sector, because if the private sector can do it better and cheaper, the private sector will get it. So California is killing transport for London. Uber. So Uber and Uber's ability to deliver an amazing service at an ever-decreasing cost, in student areas, it's cheaper to get a shared Uber than it is to take a bus. So Transport for London are going to start losing control on the infrastructure and network of transportation. They can't guarantee the quality or the safety of Uber. They have to legislate, and they can't legislate enough because then it wouldn't be a private product. So actually there is huge change coming from the private sector that's going to really shake up government.
And I mean, it comes down to why Uber works so well here. It makes my life easier, right? I know when I'm being picked up. I know where I'm being dropped off, usually. I now know what the price will be before I get in the car. In San Francisco, we had an issue for quite a long time. We never, knew when a taxi was going to pick us up, or if it would pick us up. So I think the answer comes back to how do you make life for taxpayers, for residents, just that much easier, right? It doesn't have to be the catch-all, big blue sky idea. It's sometimes just a simple fix in making it easy to know when my train or the bus is going to arrive, right? I need to get where I want to be. I've got a family. I've got to get the job. I got to get to work. I got to get home. Just make my day a little bit easier.
There's also an important narrative that often gets forgotten, which is when you look at what you need as a startup company to grow, a lot of the things you rely on actually come from the government. The government doesn't say that often enough. So Uber relies on the fact that all mapping and addresses in America is open data, right? Funded by the taxpayer. Relies on the fact that the streets are well policed and well laid out. The signs are there, we can recognize them. It relies on the education of drivers elsewhere in the state. So there's an opportunity as well as the governments to say what infrastructure as a government can only government provide. Now often that's things like transport, public transport, health, sanitation. But in a digital world, the question that the real countries that are really out there are asking themselves is what digital data infrastructure can we provide? I mean, I look at Estonia, which is an incredible country. They are now allowing anyone in the world to be a resident of Estonia remotely, to start a company in Estonia remotely, to open a bank account in Estonia remotely without visiting Estonia. That is a country building itself a digital infrastructure that will give it global competitive advantage compared to other countries. So yeah, there's things governments can do to provide infrastructure that other people can build on.
And once we Brexit, everyone will be able to come and set a bank account up in England without having visited it. So please, we are open for business.
So I'm getting the high sign, and my stomach is also telling me the same thing, which is it's time to break for lunch. And I want to thank these gentlemen, but make sure that if you have more questions that you come up and take advantage of the fact that they're here in San Francisco, especially two of them who aren't normally, and help me thank them for sharing their insights into government.
All right, just...